When I suggested in the last video that Alpha Weekend 3 would solidify my expectations for the development of the game, I was spot on. After an underwhelming release last month that felt like a gradual tune-up, if anything, this update came out swinging. Starting with a change that aimed to mirror the latest patch in Smite 1, base health was lowered. While this affected players at all stages of the game, it was most noticeable in the early game. A little bit of aggression went a long way to secure first blood in the first few waves, allowing the sometimes stagnant laning phase to feel tense and enterprising. It also meant that getting a quick lead was more commonplace, something that felt very thematic of this weekend. Gold per minion was further increased from last month. On the surface level, it would be safe to assume items were coming online even faster for both teams. However, what it really meant was that missing a wave was more detrimental than ever before. Since creeps were 3 times their previous value, if you died in lane because of the lower time to kill, you more immediately felt the difference, as the enemy got theirs and you lost out on yours. Even worse still if they did a camp or two afterwards, given that their value was also doubled. Towers had their health and protections reduced, and if you've been keeping up with the narrative so far, had you perished on your return trip to lane, you would be greeted by a tower missing a third of its HP with its first bounty claimed. Although last month saw to it that gold provided by towers was decreased, with the changed game flow and gold acquisition, one fallen objective still visibly added up. Maybe not as much globally, but certainly in regards to the enemy laner. What resulted from these changes was a faster paced, albeit more punishing match, and irregardless of how you feel about that notion, the goal that Hi-Rez had set out to accomplish was met. This, however, wasn't without consequence, as no one felt the impact so deeply as support. Since the farm was so bountiful, unless you were already ahead or flawless with your leech, it was difficult to maintain relevance throughout the game. From behind, however, forget about it. The absence of support starters in Smite 2 have put the role in an awkward place, and hopefully Hi-Rez will address the issue before it comes to a head. A big addition this time around was Blink Rune as an alternative to purification beads. For an additional 30-second cooldown, it provides a more aggressive option for players to navigate fights, while still allowing for defensive utilization. It feels like the superior choice at least 85% of the time, as it is the more proactive of the two. However, in CC heavy comps, the shorter cooldown on beads might give more traction than expected. At the moment, it is hard to say, but an even smaller cooldown or additional effect might be needed to bridge the gap if it is expected to be a valid choice. Another core mix-up to the game was that buffs drop immediately and can be stacked. Now laners will have an additional benefit they can abuse in lane, particularly with solo they no longer feel so mana starved. As for the later stages, strategic placement of buffs has the potential to change the tide of battle drastically. A carry that can apply bleed that does 10% max HP with 15% movement speed and increased intelligence and strength is a scary prospect indeed. The last major inclusion would be Hecate, the first Smite 2 exclusive goddess. I had a great time playing as her when she wasn't insta-locked. Her first ability had strong utility, switching between either marking enemies for additional damage or mesmerizing them with each cast. While her second ability wasn't the most intuitive initially, it quickly distinguished itself with its unlimited cast duration and global range. Unfortunately, her third ability, a shield, felt like an underwhelming variant of Hera's, and I found myself using it primarily to augment the two. Whereas her ultimate skill greatly made up for that with its massive disruption and damage. Lastly, in a Smite first, her passive allowed her to interact with towers to provide an aura of health and mana regeneration, or bolster allies after they receive a kill, increasing their strength and intelligence, making keen use of the new Interact the Key. So all in all, a strong showing for Hi-Rez that addressed a couple misgivings I had with the game in the last couple tests. While there is still a good bit more I'd like to see either changed or added, I'm looking at you, Vision, this test was a massive step in the right direction. Whether we will have to wait another 2 months for an update like Alpha Weekend 3, or if next month will continue its momentum, we will have to see. At the very least, any valid reason for Doom and or Gloom should have been dismantled at its core. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time.